Okay, so you've kindly written for us an article in the latest issue of Data Center Solutions about your sort of thoughts on where the data center industry is heading, perhaps during 2021. So can you give us maybe start with a sort of high level view of some of the sort of issues you think the industry faces over the next 12 months?
Yeah, sure. And yeah, firstly, thanks for having me. I think for most there's an appreciation there that this digitalisation continues to just exponentially impact everywhere and everything. And I think for me, it has different impacts depending on the sector, really. I think professional data center operators, yeah, for them, it's the challenge of meeting market demand, which I think from a lot of press, you can see there's a large part of that from your cloud providers. And yeah, if I move along into things like R&D, specialists sort of pushing innovation in sort of a host of disciplines, from medicines to transportation, and I guess maybe some more relevance in areas of enterprise, you know, in terms of their additional focus to keep up with this digitalization, and clearly wanting to sort of strike that balance between maximizing existing investments, but remaining that kind of technically and commercially flexible in order to do what they want to achieve. So I think just from a sector perspective, you know, there's lots of different types of activity, lots of different approaches, which sort of make, you know, the next 12 months really exciting. In terms of specific activity within those sectors, I think this IT transformation, something that we've spoken about for a long time, but clearly a lot of organizations, a lot of businesses are continuing to work through their transformation and how they leverage the services in the market to best meet the business or the customer requirements. So I think the IT transformation piece continues to be really, really prevalent. There's my printer going. And then another part of the activity, I think Edge, we'll probably speak about Edge a bit more later, but this really, really interesting requirement now to be much closer to the application, whether that be from a latency perspective, and to enable some of these technologies that we know are working through. And then I think finally, sort of sustainability as a big drivers for a number of reasons, whether that be regulatory, legislatively, corporate responsibility to drive this sustainable agenda. And so I feel that those three activities are really going to keep the market busy in 2021.
Okay, and in terms of drilling down a bit in some more specifics, I mean, maybe if you can talk a little bit about the sort of the need for speed. I guess it's always been there, but why it's becoming, I guess, even more important. And maybe related to that is the connectivity. Certainly during the pandemic, a lot of folk were obviously working in different and distributed environments, shall we say, and connectivity was maybe a challenge or not. So sort of speed and connectivity, what are your thoughts as to how that's looking into 2021?
Yeah, sure. So as you say, I kind of mentioned about speed in the article. I think, you know, one thing the pandemic has highlighted is that need for agile and flexible IT for those people to work from home and for those businesses to continue to operate and do what they do. I think the speed aspect is, you know, what it has proven is that this need to continue with all of this IT activity, whatever that means for you, continue with the IT projects, continue with the transformations, continue with the deployments, because fundamentally they are extremely important to keep that organization or that business moving in the direction that it wants to. So I think whether it's delivering transformation of IT services or delivering of sort of new technology which that business or their customers need, this idea that speed is important, I find extremely key, because ultimately I think it underpins potentially the success or not. I think probably a large proportion of that driver is the commercial aspect to that speed. You know, these transformation projects or these new technology projects, you know, are often based on potentially savings which are provided as a result of its completion or its successful completion. So whether that be, you know, doing something in order to not have to renew a lease of a building, or to maybe renew some licenses which you have from an IT perspective, you know, these all have cost implications and have probably contributed to why the project was a good idea to start with. So, you know, meeting those milestones can ultimately determine that success, and potentially the reduction of overhead, which in the current climate, there's probably a number of businesses that are looking to do that in order to manage their way out of this this current climate. So yeah, the speed is trying to put a bit more of a focus on actually these things typically need to happen quite quickly in order for the benefits to be realised.
And I guess to the connectivity piece, that's I suppose that's a necessary part of the speed, because obviously if you haven't got the right connections, you know, whether they're just slow ones or you just can't physically connect, you know, 10 or 15 employees or 1,000 employees, you've got an issue with getting, you know, data and work around.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, this connected world, I think there was a number of, you know, there was a number of Keysource customers where we managed some of their IT on their behalf, and actually provisioning more connectivity into that IT stack was an immediate reaction, which we helped them do. And I think as we look ahead, actually to kind of around the applications of 5G and sort of enabling this fourth industrial revolution of, you know, the IoT and autonomous systems and the like, you know, that connectivity network is going to be even more tested and ultimately you know, even more needed for this stuff to work. So so yeah, I think from a connectivity perspective for data centers, you know, clearly these data centers are going to be collecting more data, crunching more data, distributing more data. I think maybe the more kind of interesting part to that is the strategies used to do that. I think, yes, on one hand, there's kind of build more capacity, which is one factor. But how the businesses maybe use these assets, how they're protected to provide a level of availability that's required, and how they're maximized as well. You can imagine these networks are getting maybe more and more distributed compared to maybe a more centralized model that we've seen previously. So making sure this all knits together in the right way but is protected and maximized, I think is going to be key. And you can probably see that there will be cases of over provisioning or over commitment of certain services in order to react to demand. And I think it's again, you know, I guess like we have done in individual data centers themselves, is to try and manage that capacity that the customers have, and ensure that supports that requirement for the customer.
Okay, you've referenced, I think, 5G and Edge a couple of times, which is unsurprising perhaps, because it's one of those topics that everyone talks about and is aware of. I guess you could also maybe say cynically, it's a typical hype thing. Everyone's talked about it for quite a long time, whether anyone's actually doing anything with it. But what are your thoughts, I guess, as to where it's at and how it might, clearly, as you pointed out, taking data near to where people consume it, etc., makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. But there are certain logistical challenges. So, what are you seeing, I guess, and what do you anticipate during the next 12 months?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I think it's a really exciting time. I think, I guess just to lean on my experience, Keysource completed a number of projects with Dell in 2019 and 2020, which was deploying some of the Dell Edge modules to a customer that was developing autonomous vehicles. So, these were real edge deployments in climates that were extremely challenging. And you mentioned logistics earlier in the question, which was absolutely, there's a key factor to this is this ability to plan these deployments, execute these deployments, and ensure that they're going to continually operate how we expect. So so I think that that type of activity in the market is going to be extremely key in order to support these applications, and therefore I think not only the demand for the product providers of these edge facilities or edge boxes, but also the requirement to deploy and operate them in a variety of applications. I mean, I have to remind myself sometimes, 5G, its range is about 1,000 feet. So in terms of the quantity of these edge sites that are going to be needed to be able to work with these 5G types of applications, then I think it's going to be quite remarkable. So that's what I think.
Okay, and also convergence, I'm intrigued because traditionally we've all talked about for donkey's years IT and facilities converging, and that may or may not be happening. Clearly it's desirable and people are maybe at different stages, but I think in the article you alluded to a slightly wider sort of view of it. So you talked about sort of technology, engineering, the sort of physical property and people. Can you just sort of explain what you meant by that sort of convergence?
Yeah, so I suppose at Keysource, we always talk about the convergence of those four things. Nearly in every project that we undertake for a customer, those four things appear in some dynamic, and whether they are directly impacted or there's some part of the supply chain. I suppose the important thing there is, the reasons for us putting focus on these four converging factors is ultimately success. Often the success of these projects, have these dependencies across these four things. So having kind of one or two nailed down just doesn't cut it. And so actually being mindful that we need to be addressing these four factors of a particular project, really ensure that we can be successful. I think in addition to that, what we've found, and especially with some of the challenges we've got moving forward, we spoke about Edge and 5G, but this whole ability to be innovative in a market that, to be fair, has been very innovative over the last 10, 15 years, that's for sure. So when we start looking at these different factors of a project, we can start to maybe leverage them against each other in order to come up with some different ideas in how to address a problem. And so just taking that slightly broader view has worked very well for us. So it's something that we'll continue to do. And I think in terms of its applications, as you say, it may be a stuttering start, but certainly to, if this is this addresses 5G applications through the use of things like bus shelters, or sustainability with energy storage systems that can really work for both the application and the customer, then nothing's off the table, I suppose, and that's why we talk about that convergence.
Okay, you mentioned sustainability there, so maybe it's a good time to move on to that. I think the world is coming to Scotland. Is Scotland? I think it is the end, back end of this year. COP26 happening, and with our friends in America rejoining the Paris Agreement. I'm guessing the environment's probably never been higher on certainly the political agenda, and businesses. You mentioned the innovation of the data center industry. It's obviously done a lot, but how would you characterize what it has achieved, on the sort of sustainability front, and I guess crucially, what more can it do? And I suppose that's without getting you too confused, voluntarily, and or will legislation, will government sort of wield the stick as well as the carrot?
Yeah, so sustainability and energy efficiency has been part and parcel of our industry, with varying priority levels, I guess it's fair to say, over time. We've got this challenge where the services that our industry and the data centers themselves underpin are exponentially increasing, and yet the need to be more sustainable and more energy efficient continues to increase with it as well. So it's a challenging area. I think it's fair to say that predominantly the economic gain or the commercial gain for these data center owners and operators continues to be a main driver. Yes, there's corporate social responsibility as well, but to be more competitive in the market, to increase the bottom line, then being more sustainable, being more energy efficient is going to enable that. I saw a report at the start of January from an industry body, kind of reporting that the average PUE for 2020 was 1.49 in Europe. Now, I know we can kind of argue the PUE metric itself, but I think what this does do is it indicates that there's some opportunity to improve that efficiency level within these data centers. And we know that we see today the sort of 1.1 somethings or the 1.2s. I believe to get there, a large proportion of this is actually optimizing existing facilities. I think we all see when these new facilities come online, and actually they're extremely efficient. They've got some really good ideas of how to be more sustainable each time. But I think the opportunity within the European market and probably globally as well is trying to optimize those existing facilities and real estate. Bearing in mind these were probably designed and commissioned for a completely different load that they're operating at now. So I guess some things we did, which was kind of relaunching our energy optimization study in 2019 to specifically target these types of facilities. And we just had, to give you one example, we had one customer that saved over 800,000 kilowatt hours in a year through some of the implementations that were recommended. So there's huge opportunity to work towards this this carbon neutral status. So again, it's going to need some more innovation to get us there, and kind of bear in mind that, again, in an industry that's continued to exponentially see huge amounts of growth, it may need some help along the way.
And also, I mean, we talked briefly about the convergence, but do you also think, I mean, you mentioned the PUE metric, the one is the IT load. Does the data center side of have any responsibility, or do you think it should be getting more involved with helping people looking at their IT infrastructure and ways in which the two can overall optimize, the compute power, if you like, they're getting to, related to the power consumption? Or do you think data centers still sort of exist to say, okay, right, we'll take that and do what we can with it? How do you see that?
Oh, absolutely. The PUE metric was there to give some common language. There's ultimately it's things like the kilowatt hours at the end of the day are the basis of measure, and also the source of where that power being consumed is being sourced from as well. So in terms of our industry, yeah, absolutely, if we have the opportunity, we will get involved right across the piece and understand how we optimize the whole stack. I think that's where the real opportunity is, when we can start to optimize the IT layer and then start to have some real great ways of being able to optimize the data center estate. Then that's going to get to where these customers want to be, for sure.
Okay, and the conversation we've had so far is kind of assumed that there are vast amounts of people out there that know everything there is to know about data centers and all the topics we talked about. The reality potentially is a little bit different. I know it can vary from country to country, etc. But overall, am I right in thinking that there's a potential skills shortage, and therefore, that's a bit of a worry for the industry moving forward?
Yeah, for sure. Again, I was just reading a data center staff forecasting report for the next 4 to 5 years with some really interesting figures about how many extra people this industry is going to need. And I guess one thing's for sure, in terms of what that forecast says, I can probably bet my house that it's going to be significantly more in terms of what they're saying as well. But I think it's something that has been spoken about a long time, and probably fair to say it's been difficult to address it. Not to say that there's certain businesses and organizations that haven't. I think obviously the work they're doing is fantastic, but I think observationally, there needs to be, I share some views that my colleagues have in the industry where this needs to start within schools in order to generate that interest. I can probably imagine a lot of people in our industry started off doing something within their education that led them to where they are today, and I won't bore you with how I got into the industry, but it was probably more by luck than me deciding that was the path I wanted to go. So actually, being able to have that type of information available, or those courses rather available within schools, we'll need to address that, and then obviously the continuing of the intern and the graduate programs, which I think most businesses within our organisation have, but certainly a huge challenge which isn't probably biting us as hard yet, but certainly give it another 5 or 10 years even, then I think we'll be in a completely different position.
Okay, and just before we wind up, in terms of what the company yourselves are doing, I mean, are there common, we've touched on a lot of topics. If there is a typical customer that you have, is it this digital transformation sort of focus that is driving everything, or what are the 1 or 2 major key drivers for your customers, if there are such things as common themes amongst them?
Yeah, so I guess okay, so I'll give you a couple of examples. So one example with a customer at the moment is we're kind of helping them define and implement their sort of hybrid, if you like, data center model. So that's leveraging an existing on-premise data center facility that's an existing investment that's still running. How they leverage the co-location market in order to meet certain business and customer requirements as well. So, i.e. data sovereignty, for example, and also the cloud. So these have to be planned out with the customer, how we're going to get there, go through the processes in order to define what that requirement is, go to the market to find the right partners, and then to provide that resource to help them implement and get there. So I guess that's one example of an enterprise customer that's going through this transformation at the moment, because a part of that will be also taking advantage of actually rationalising the IT estate as well, and to be able to refresh that for the future. I think a second example is especially in the professional data center the professional data center operator market. We see expansion of existing facilities being quite prevalent, and that often requires a skill and a level of experience in order to work in that live environment. So, with those types of projects comes a lot of trust to to safeguard their customers and to safeguard those relationships. So I'd say those are probably kind of two examples of work that we're doing quite a bit of at the moment.
Okay, and I can't not ask before we finally finish. MBO, I can't remember, it was a week or so ago announcement about that. So
yes,
clearly there's a business reason behind that. But what are they? Are customers going to see anything different for a while, or is it same? Just a sort of change of the ownership model and everything carries on, or do you think it'll be giving you freedom, flexibility to do other bits and pieces?
Yes, I suppose right now our existing customers won't see any difference. They'll continue to have that experience that they expect from Keysource, and we will continue to provide all the services, and we'll continue to provide all the services that we've been providing. I think this MBO is something that's been in the planning for a while now, a long time. With the current climate, it's maybe taken a little longer than everybody would like, but that was outside of our control. But what this does do is, we really look forward now to a platform with our funding partner Tosca to continue to grow the business. We're fortunate that Keysource has experienced a good level of growth over recent years anyway. But what this new model does now is allow us to grow further and provide that platform for expansion as well. So hopefully I'll be able to tell you about some of the new and exciting ventures that we'll be working through over the next few months.
That's brilliant. I've really enjoyed chatting with you. So, John, thanks very much indeed for your time. Thanks.
No, thank you. Cheers. Take care.